Hey everyone, I'm Miss Shaz Jones, the host of BibleHax, and we've got a bit of a different episode today. We're going to be looking at the ABCs of podcasting because I've recently learned I've been doing just about everything wrong. So I'm joined by an expert today, a genuine expert, and I'm going to let her introduce herself so that I can get some tips on how to introduce a guest properly. So welcome, Sian.
Hi, Sharon. I don't know about introducing myself properly. My name is Sian Gard. I met Sharon quite a few years ago when I was working at the Australian Broadcasting Corporation in Perth, Western Australia. And I have been working in radio and broadcasting since the year 2000. So I feel like I've been doing it forever. So I've worked as a radio host. I've worked as a radio producer and executive producer. And more recently, over the last few years, I've worked as a chief of staff, which means that I manage a bureau of radio journalists and broadcasters and help them produce the best content that they can for the different platforms that we service these days, which is radio, TV, news, digital, online, and social media. So, yeah.
Wonderful. Okay, I remember like 12 years ago working with you in Western Australia, and I think you're in television at that time. Is that right?
Yes. So I've worked in TV as well. I've worked as a researcher. I've worked as an associate producer and a field producer. So I've done lots of different things over the years, and it's all about literally learning how to tell a story in different ways. So I like to think of myself as a storyteller more so than anything else, because I help people tell their stories, and that's what I love to do.
Wonderful. And I think you're in Tunisia for the BBC
Yes.
in Africa or something. What was that all about?
Well, the BBC has BBC Media Action, which is part of the BBC, and part of empowerment and democracy is about having a supported media industry that basically goes into different countries, developing countries around the world, and giving locals the key capabilities to tell their own stories. So it's no good me going into a different country, parachuting in unless I'm a foreign correspondent, and just doing all the stories for my local audience back in Australia. It's much more sustainable and part of ongoing development to have people that are empowered to tell their own stories in their own voice. So BBC Media Action in Tunisia has a program that brings in young people from Lybia and also from other parts of Africa to learn how to be better journalists and broadcasters, so that when they go back to their home countries, say in Lybia, and they're working for different outlets, they've got the skills that they need to tell the stories that are for their local audience. So I was asked to go over and teach around documentary making, and it was really fun, and it was really difficult because in my class I had students that spoke only Arabic, only French, or a range of different languages, or maybe even a bit of Italian. So we had my poor interpreter. By the end of the day, I think they were very tired because they were translating my English into, sometimes 3 or 4 different languages. But it was amazing, and I'm still in contact with some of the young people that I helped teach while I was there all those years ago, and they're doing amazing things in their own countries.
That's great. So I think my audience will be starting to understand that you are a genuine expert, and that not just nationally in Australia, but having international influence. Now, speaking of stories, you're the first guest who has asked me to bring a Doona. Why did you ask me to bring a Doona?
Well, talking about audio and podcasting, one of the first things that you've got to keep in mind when you're setting out to do podcasting is to have good quality audio. And if you've got oodles of money, you can set yourself up or hire out a studio when you start podcasting. But the truth of the matter is that most people can't afford that. And, you shouldn't have to outlay hundreds and thousands of dollars just to get a podcast up and running. Bringing a Doona is about, when you're recording, say at home, being really mindful of how sound travels in your home.
Right.
So First off, get some good advice on the type of microphone to use. A lot of people use or end up buying microphones which aren't so great sometimes.
Okay.
So do your research on picking the right microphone. If you're going to record at home, be mindful of things like floor tiles. They're very bouncy and reflective of sound. And also things like windows. They can, sound, we project our voices. And if you're around a lot of windows, it's actually going to bounce back the audio. And sometimes you get a horrible reverb. So the best way to reduce that, if you're in a house where there's, wooden floors or tiled floors, and you've got lots of brick and concrete around, the best way to reduce that is literally by sticking a doona or a blanket, or I think they call it a duvet in other countries. I'm not too sure. You can either put it over the windows so that it reduces the bounce back of the sound waves against the glass, or you can actually put it over your head and create a Doona tent or a duvet tent over you and your recording equipment, so that it doesn't actually, you're not getting that bounce back from the walls. So you're reducing the bounce and the reverberation. So you're getting nice, clear audio, because one of the things that you should be aiming for is always having at least really good audio, good quality audio.
Okay. Well, I just go check on all the wrong things, because I'm next to a window in a brick building. I've got wooden floors. So
look,
my research on a microphone was a listener messaging me on LinkedIn and saying you need to get this microphone. So I was like, okay. So I just got in the car, went to Officeworks and got the microphone they told me to.
Well, what I would recommend is if you're sitting down and doing conversations like we're having, what you need is a microphone which is a directional microphone. So something that's you need your guest to sit in front of, or you need to sit in front of, and you can talk directly into the microphone. What you don't need is an omnidirectional microphone, which means it picks up the sound from everywhere. An omnidirectional mic is something that you take outside to get as much natural sound as possible if you're creating a soundscape. So there is a difference. You don't have to spend a lot, but you just have to be careful about the microphone that you use, because you could end up with the wrong mic. Now,
the other thing you told me was to do 2 fists. So
oh yes. So if you've got a microphone, if you imagine a microphone sitting in front of you, it's what we call microphone etiquette. So if you've got a microphone sitting in front of you, what you want to do is get both of your fists, make both your hands, make them into a fist, and then put one on the table in front of you. So you've got your thumb at the top, and then place your other hand on top. So it's almost like you're building a tower with your fists. And then what you do is you take it to the top of the microphone that is sitting in front of you, and you place it in front of you, and you should be 2 fists away from the microphone.
From like my mouth or my chin or my other
from
chin?
your mouth. So you've got to have the fists basically in line with your mouth, because if you're using the right kind of microphone, you're using a directional microphone, the sound should be going directly from your mouth into the top of the microphone.
Okay.
So that's why you need 2 fists away. And the reason why it's 2 fists is because if you get too close and you're a loudspeaker or someone who throws their vocal cords really loudly, you can pop. Every time you say a P, you can pop, and it really is quite harsh on the ears. But if you're a quiet speaker, what you're going to have to do is still keep those 2 fists away, but actually push up the audio levels. So,
right.
Yeah.
So I'm amazed how many people tell me that I'm a low talker or too quiet on the podcast, because I'm like, when I'm, out with friends and that, everyone tells me I'm too loud, all of my family. My ex-husband used to say when I'm with family, I go up at least 10 decibels. So I think it's because I'm in listening mode, so I do get quite quiet and contemplative compared to how I normally am. So I'm trying to work on that. But you told me too about some software for post-production.
Yeah, so there's some free software that you can find. It's called Audacity. That's the one that I've used in the past. And it's quite intuitive. So if you're used to editing audio, then go and have a look at Audacity. And there's lots of sort of free online programs, if you look around, that can help you change your audio around. And there's also now lots of different types of apps that you can use that they may cost about $21 US to buy, where you can record on your phone and you can change all the different settings on your phone and all that sort of stuff. So there is a lot of bits and pieces around. You don't have to spend a fortune, though. That's my caveat, is you do not have to spend a fortune. I mean, if you really want to, you can go back to the 70s where they used to staple egg cartons to the walls to stop the bouncing of audio. So, you know.
Since you had the audacity to tell me about Audacity, and I realized I had no idea what I was doing. I'd just been winging it, and I hadn't even stopped to sort of like do any kind of research. I went to the library and I got Podcasting for Dummies.
Right.
And their recommendation for post-production of audio is Audacity. So I was like, she's on the money. The expert that I needed to have. So I wanted to move on to Blunders. Apart from being a walking example of all the things you shouldn't do, what are some of the most common blunders that you see when, because I know that you advise podcasters on how to improve their shows. So what blunders are you seeing?
Well, just first and foremost is that people, when they decide they want to do a podcast, don't actually know why they're doing it. So podcasting, especially about content, is about being consistent and presenting your audience with interesting stories or interesting narratives over a period of time. So first off, you've got, if you're going to do a podcast, know the reason why you're doing it. So are you doing it for fun? Are you doing it for business? And once you know why you're doing it, then think about, say if you're doing it for fun and you're doing it about cooking, just as an example, think about what you're trying to get across in your cooking. Is it because you're frustrated because you can see these really fantastic tips for saving on food waste, and that will be the main focus of your podcast? Or in terms of cooking, you love all these fantastic chefs all around the world and you want to have conversations with them about their passion for cooking and how they started in cooking? Or is it because you can see that there is room for, say, young people to learn how to cook because they're not learning how to cook at home, and when they leave home, they spend all their money on Uber Eats and takeaway? So figure out what is the story that you're trying to tell, and you know, first off, why, and what you're trying to say to the audience. Because the thing is that people, what they don't do is then when they're doing a podcast is then once they've figured out those two things, they don't sit down and have a plan for the content that they're hoping to discuss over a period of time. And when they don't have a plan, it's a bit like if you plan to fail, you fail to plan. If you don't have a plan, then you're going to sit there and think, I'll be keen beans, and you do it maybe 3 times and then you run out of steam and ideas.
Right.
So that's when you start to have the inconsistency of the podcast being delivered to the audience. And then you also start to have the inconsistency of quality content. So that's where the content that's coming through for the audience doesn't hit the money. It doesn't actually give me anything as an audience member that I need to hear. And then those podcasts are usually the ones that sort of die off over a period of time. Okay. So, I mean, people just think you can sit down and have a podcast and just talk and it all sort of falls into place. But there's also the audience that you have to consider is, you know, why is someone investing maybe 7 to 20 minutes of their time of active listening, which is very different to passive listening, into the words that you have to share? Everyone is time poor. People want the information that they want in short, sharp bites that are really easily digestible. And if they're tuning into your content, they're tuning in because they love your content and they want to hear your content, but they need it to be good content. So to recap is you've got to understand why you're doing the podcast, first and foremost, why, and also then planning out your podcast and what you want to focus on, and then giving yourself a structure over a period of time.
That's good. And it reminds me, like Jesus was obviously one of the greatest communicators of all time, because we still talk about his stories. Like people who've never been to Sunday school or church or whatever still know about the Good Samaritan or the prodigal son. So he created some good stories
Yes.
that really had longevity. And you're right, they were quite short, like soundbitey in places, so that time poor people could hear the short
message.
section and keep it in their memory for lots of time. So that's really good, interesting tips.
Yeah. And I mean, he was a good communicator, because at the end of the day, as you say, the stories that Jesus shared are still with us today. And the thing is too, because I find that people are so overwhelmed by the amount of information that they have, you want your story to stick with them. So in the words of Valerie Geller, who is one of my favorite radio people that I've learned from over the years, never be boring. Your content has to be interesting. Never, ever be boring. Be an interesting storyteller. Let your inner Oscar winner come out.
That's good. Let your inner Oscar winner come out. That
come out.
Okay, so we've done
get in touch
audio,
with your.
We've done some blunders. We've touched on content in the blunders, but can we talk about content a bit more? Like Jesus was identified as the Word, so part of his identity was content. So what tips can you give us for, great content?
Well, great content is, if you're not interested in a topic, how are you supposed to talk about it?
Right.
That's first and foremost, above all and everything. How are you supposed to sustain a podcast, which could be once a week for 365 days? So you could be doing that for 52 weeks. So that's 52 podcasts. You've got to be interested in that topic.
Yeah.
And you've got to have a curiosity about that topic. So if there's something that you're only mildly interested in, don't focus on that, because you're going to get bored. Right. If you're bored, the audience is bored. And as the podcaster or the person behind the scenes creating the podcast, you need to be passionate about it. You need to have enthusiasm for it. You need to love the topic, because you've got to spend, particularly hours researching it, finding the right people to talk to. Like, a good podcast takes time to put together, and it's driven by people's passion. So keep that at top of mind. Don't do something that's going to make you yawn and fall asleep within 5 seconds, or you think you should, because that's the area of work and it's been that way for 25 years. Do something that you're interested in. If you're interested in fishing, do fishing. If you're passionate about, doing photography, do photography. Don't focus on something that is, it doesn't bring out the spark of enthusiasm in you, because otherwise you will get bored.
Okay.
And as I said,
if we're enthusiastic about a topic and we've got someone who's passionate about their topic, can you give me some tips for how, because if I'm standing in a fish and chip shop, I can make friends with the person next to me before I walk out with my order, but it's quite shallow. And by the very nature of this, which is, spirituality, we tend to go deeper. And also it's about people's businesses. So they want something practical. So how do I make a connection with someone that is practical and deep in a short time?
So I think the thing is, the trick to that is always having a conversation with the person offline first, before you hit the record button. Is talking to them about I'm always curious, for me, especially if you're talking about business, is, where did someone get the motivation? It's a bit like podcasting. Where did someone get the motivation to decide to start a business in that particular area? And it could be, and the surprising answers to that could be anything from, well, my grandfather used to take me down and we would go fishing on a Sunday morning type thing. And I've had responses to that when I've asked people off air in the radio context, giving me responses like that to say this is how they started out in a business. Or even just, I asked one person when I was interviewing them about why they started their wine delivery business online. And it was because their experience is that they lost everything in the Black Saturday bushfires. This was years and years ago. So when someone gives you an answer like that, it's better to do it off air and give that time to listen to them so that you can find out what's the true motivation for what they're doing, so that you can then go and structure your questions around that.
Right.
Because you can have really surface interviews and sometimes they're perfectly fine. But if you want to get into more of the deep and spiritual side of why people do what they do, you need to give them time and you need to give them space so you can listen to them and give them time to actually respond. And the best way of doing that is by having a conversation without the pressure of hitting the record button.
Okay.
And then structuring your introduction when you're opening your podcast to immediately get into the topic that you want to, and opening with a meaningful question that will take them to that place.
So you would not work your way up to the meaningful question as a climax at the end. You would open with that.
Yeah, because you not only do you immediately engage your what we call in the radio industry talent or your guest, so you immediately engage them, but also you immediately put the most interesting topic at the top of the conversation. And as Valerie Geller says, never be boring. So you don't, you want to engage the audience straight away. You don't want them to have to wait 7 minutes. And as I said, people are time poor.
Yeah.
They don't want to wait forever. They want the nuts and bolts of the story or why they should be listening at the top. And you want to hook them into that. And this is what we do with radio, is that we structure, we give the audience a reason to listen. So when we're introducing the person that we're about to talk to, we give them a reason to listen. Okay. And then the first question that we engage our guest with is a question where we're going to get a meaningful response. We're going to get something that's going to push the interview into places that we want it to go as the interviewer.
Okay. Well, that's like completely the reverse of what I have been doing. So again, I'm a walking example of blunder.
Oh, Sharon, stop it. This is all, like, I do, this is my daily bread and butter. This is what I learn and this is what I do for a living.
That's why it's so valuable.
And this is what I teach. This is what I teach. So,
talk a bit more about, so you're going to a new position at AFTRS, I believe. Talk about that.
Yeah, so the Australian Film, Television, Radio School is based in Sydney, and it's been around for a very long time. And I'm going there to teach radio and podcasting as their senior lecturer. And I'm really excited about it because I love passing on skills to younger people.
Yeah.
And I love, well, any age person that's actually enrolled in the course. It doesn't matter if you're young, old, or whatever. But to me, it's the privilege of giving back. I've been doing this a long time. So I've 23 years this year. So now I get to give back to young people for 12 months and help them find their voice and help them find the skills that they need to go off and be future broadcasters and podcasters.
Yeah, that's amazing. I don't know if any of our listeners have worked in a place where people aren't willing to share. I call them cuddlers. They kind of hold everything close and won't share their information with you.
Yeah.
Like even at the ABC, there were some people like that, but I remember you as always being willing to share your tips. So I think this position that you're going into is so you, because you are very free with what you share. You're open and generous, but you're also obviously knowledgeable because you've had so much experience and skilled in teaching. I know a lot of people who have the first few, but they have no patience. They have no ability to articulate what they know as it concerns the other person. So I think you're going to be brilliant at that.
Thank you. That makes me feel very humble.
Building an audience, marketing. I don't know if you've had any experience with that or the nuances of that. What can you tell us about building an audience?
So building an audience takes time, and that's one of the things that I've been chief of staff at the ABC for, it feels like forever, but it's going on close to 10 years. And one of the things that we have to do at the ABC is build an audience, but also find new audience. Okay. So it's about understanding who is consuming, if you've got a business, who is consuming your product, and understanding your product, and knowing why someone would want to invest the time and the money in your product. So I take those principles. I've actually got a background in marketing and advertising, would you believe? Yeah.
Helpful.
So understanding the demographics of who you're talking to and how you're talking to them. You know, are they people that are, you know, a younger audience that are on TikTok? Are they a audience that are maybe they have children that are on TikTok, or are they more of an audience that, you know, they like to read through the newspaper and get their information from the newspaper? So building an audience, again, is about understanding who they are and what motivates them and what drives them. It's also understanding their economic and socioeconomic background. And it also is about understanding the platforms where they're getting their information from. So if I was to create a podcast around, say, this is a great idea for real estate agents, by the way, about the little nooks and crannies of, say, Bendigo, where I live in Victoria for the moment, the nooks and crannies and the life that you could live in Bendigo and the schools and all that sort of stuff. I could do a podcast based on all the things that maybe would attract home buyers into the region. So people that are coming to Bendigo are double income, no kids. They're also double income with kids. So fairly sort of late 30s, early 40s. If they're from a regional area, they'll be in their 20s, more likely when they get married and have children. And we've also got a lot of retirees that move up into this neck of the woods. So the audience for buying in this area is quite obvious. So I'd craft my content around the audience and what they're interested in. So it's about understanding who those people are and what they're looking for in their local community or in their personal lives.
And how do you do that? Like I've seen, I think on Instagram there was a Fox and Giraffe cafe, like a small business in Bendigo.
Yeah. I actually bought my coffee from there this morning.
Okay. Shout out to Fox and Giraffe. So do you do it like across all platforms, or do you choose one and do that well? How do you approach your marketing?
I think you choose one and do it really well. Okay. So there's quite a few businesses that have moved into Bendigo. So Fox and Giraffe, first off, they've got foot traffic where they are. So they've got a lot of cars that drive past. And they did a complete and utter refurbishment on the place. It used to be an old deli and it was pretty crusty.
Okay.
But they also have a good position because where they are, there was no cafes close by or anything else like that. So they had really prominent signage, which is great for marketing. They also have really well-known owners who around town have worked really well in the hospitality industry to build reputations. So everyone in the hospo industry knew that they were moving there. And they do have a good social media presence, and they have in that team, I think there's a few people that actually have taken control of the social media presence and made sure that they've built a personality around their brand.
Okay.
So they chose social media because they're aiming at a particular audience that are social media savvy and like to engage in that space. And if you look at Facebook, mainly it's people around my age in their 40s that are rusted on Facebook users. We've been on there since 2007, Sharon. We're not moving anytime soon. So I think it's you pick one platform and you do it really well, and you really understand your audience that are engaging with you, and also you really work to engage that audience. And it could be, maybe it's not Facebook, maybe it's newsletters. Who knows what it is, but if you know your audience, then you know which platform works best.
Yeah, I like, obviously Jesus did a good job at building his audience, because it's over 2,000 years later, it's not in the same geography, and there's, you know, a billion people that are still sharing that message. So he just said, go into all the world and share the good news. So it was quite broad, but the beauty of it being quite broad is that it still applies today, right? Anything that
Yeah.
is in your world, whether that's just Bendigo or Tunisia or beyond Africa, you're just sharing the good news that you have, right?
Yeah. And it's just, it's again, Jesus told timeless stories.
Yeah.
So the stories that disappear from our pages of history are stories that have like almost like a timestamp on them. And they're also, when I say timestamp, they're only just relevant to that time. But then years later, historians look back and they go, well, there's a historical context there, but what's the lesson we can learn from it? And I think that's the same with Jesus, is that there's a lesson that we can learn from what Jesus said all those years ago. And that's why the message keeps on being repeated, because it's relevant still to this modern day. And it's also something that we can continue to relate to, because as human beings, we're a bit silly sometimes, Sharon. We don't learn our lessons very well. So that's why we keep going back, because we keep on making the same silly mistakes, right?
I've noticed that. I think, like, also when he was asked, what is the greatest commandment, like, which is, the law, with lawyers and Pharisees and law experts asking him, he said, love the Lord your God with all your heart and love your neighbor as you love yourself. So he brought it just down to connection and love. And I think no matter what the context is or what the time is, what the topic is, it's really about that love and that connection, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And every day that we do a radio story or a podcast story, it doesn't matter what it is, it's about how you connect your audience to that story, how you make that story relevant to the audience. And it's in podcasting, it's like using the words you language. So how are you today? I'm glad you could join me here on Sharon's podcast, BibleHax. You're with Sharon. It's you. You're only speaking to one person listening, because one person's engaging, because one person is taking the time to engage with your content. So it's the language you use, and it's also how you introduce the topic. So make the topic relevant to that one person that you're talking to. So think about the person you're talking to.
That was,
and you build a connection.
That I was doing wrong. I was saying our entrepreneurs or our audience instead of just you. So
yeah, you could say you as an entrepreneur, or it's lovely to have you with me here.
Yeah. Okay, well, I have loved hanging out with you today and getting all of your great content. And I just want to say personally that you are such an inspiration to me, because you are always trying new things, going to new places, meeting new people, and you have the courage to do that, even when you don't have all of the problems solved or all of the answers that you need. You still just step out and you just say to people, this is what I need, this is what I'm looking for. And you have that faith and that confidence that it's going to happen. And that's really inspiring for me. And I'm sure it's inspiring to you as you're listening, to just go for your dreams. So I'm sorry, we're out of time, Sian. Where can people get in touch with you?
Just look for me on LinkedIn, and I'm more than happy to touch base or have a chat.
Excellent. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Please go and give us a rating or review on Apple Podcasts, and you can join our community on facebook.com/BibleHax, which is BibleHax. We would love you to join us, and also you'll be advised of the upcoming episodes so you never miss one. So thank you for joining us today.